Joining me now is Iraq War veteran Jon Soltz, chairman of VoteVets.org, and Karen Finney, an MSNBC political analyst and former DNC communications director. Thank you both for joining me tonight. John, I want you to respond to Senator McCain's point, quoting General Cain, "We won the war, and now we risk losing the peace."
It's offensive. I mean, first off, General Cain, the architect of the surge, I mean, the surge was a huge failure, probably the greatest failure of the entire war. I mean, two of the bigger reasons we have less violence in Iraq, and we still have a sustainable amount of violence. Trust me, when I was waiting for my helicopter off of my base in Iraq 2 weeks ago, they just blew up a truck bomb and killed 20 soldiers. You know, we had a political agreement in the Sunni awakening where we brought some Sunni into the government. The second biggest reason that we had better security was because the most important victory of the entire Iraq war was in 2008, and it was a battle that was not fought by American troops. It was fought by Iraqi troops against Muqtada al-Sadr, who's a radical Shia who wanted to kill Americans and fight the Iraqi government. And he has now came into the Iraqi government and basically is Maliki's partner, the Prime Minister of Iraq. So when John McCain and General Cain talk about this type of rhetoric, I would just ask them, why was I just in Iraq? What did we fight for? What did all these Americans die for? Why do we have 30,000 wounded Americans and 4,500 dead troops? I thought it was to build an Iraqi democracy. So under what they want to do, they are guaranteeing defeat, because the only way the Americans can be defeated in Iraq is to stay one day after the Iraqis don't want us there. And that is 31 December 2011, and an agreement signed by President Obama's predecessor, George W. Bush. Why do we fight for a democracy if we're not going to respect what it wants?
John, as the military expert among us here tonight, I just want to ask you, strategically, what other option existed at this point in time?
Well, I don't think, I mean, this is our only option because the Iraqi government wants us to leave. When you look at the fragile political agreement that we have in Iraq, the leading Iraqi party in the last election was more of a nationalist party by Ayad Alawi called Al-Iraqiyya. But Nouri al-Maliki became the prime minister again because he aligned himself with the hardline Shia. So the hardline Shia that gave Maliki the ability to be the prime minister by creating enough seats to get over 50%, they vehemently opposed U.S. forces being stayed in Iraq. So the Iranians had armed these Shia groups over the summer months, and I got to tell you, we got pounded in Iraq over the summer. 240-millimeter rockets, EFPs going off. At one point, I think there was almost 20 soldiers killed in a 6-week period. So the Shia coalition that governed the country essentially could have fallen and fractured if Nouri al-Maliki had requested an extension of U.S. forces. He had no political option other than to keep the status quo, which is the agreement that U.S. forces leave.
Let's listen to how President Obama presented this to the country yesterday.
Over the last 3 years, nearly 150,000 U.S. troops have left Iraq. And over the next few days, a small group of American soldiers will begin the final march out of that country. Those last American troops will move south on desert sands, and then they will cross the border out of Iraq with their heads held high. One of the most extraordinary chapters in the history of the American military will come to an end. Iraq's future will be in the hands of its people. America's war in Iraq will be over.
Karen, doesn't it seem a little hard to believe that the American president now will not be locked in periodic meetings over whether to send more troops into Iraq in a surge-like move, or whether to draw them down, that we're now actually out?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a really wonderful thing to contemplate. And particularly, you know, Lawrence, when you think back to the beginning of the war and all of the people, in addition to the incredible work of our soldiers on the ground, the people here at home and the movement here at home that helped to create the political pressure that moved us forward to get to this point is really important, and I think, you know, really sparked a movement in terms of movement politics that I think is part of the carry-on of what we're seeing now and has been so important. So I think it's an accomplishment that many people should take, you know, a great deal of pride in the work that was done to try to get us to this point. And the other thing I would say, John and I were just talking about this in the green room. I mean, to the political situation on the ground, it's such a vicious cycle to say, well, if we leave, something bad could happen. And I think John's point is actually us leaving is making it more likely that something bad won't happen, frankly. And I think, but this argument that the Republicans have tried to use that says, well, like if we stay, if we leave, something bad's going to happen, and therefore we've got to keep troops there. They're just not hearing the fact that the American people don't want that anymore. We don't want to be there anymore, and the Iraqis don't want us there anymore. So, hey, we all agree, let's bring our troops home.
Yeah, the polls are very clear on this. They speak very clearly about the politics of it, but Republicans then are speaking an unpopular position. I want to listen to Mitt Romney, one of the front runners, in speaking to the Des Moines Register. Let's listen to him.
They were unable to negotiate a status of forces agreement to allow the 10 to 20 to 30,000 troops to remain, which I think was a failure on the part of the administration.
John, was that a failure?
Look, it's a success of the administration. What was going on in Iraq in the summer months is there was a tremendous amount of pressure from military leaders inside Iraq and the Pentagon and certain members over at the embassy. I mean, they're people that wanted to stay in Iraq. There was stories being leaked to the press. We're going to keep 10,000 troops. We're going to keep 5,000 troops. We're going to keep 15,000 troops. None of which would have done what Senator McCain or General Keane think. I mean, we're really not that involved out in the field with the Iraqis anymore. We're only training them on high-intensity conflict, force-on-force stuff. We're not even advising them out in the field with them, on the roads anymore. So, it's completely false to say this. Now, the White House deserves actually a tremendous amount of credit because there was a lot of people trying to deploy troops, talk about leaking stories to the press. So the administration really shot back with this idea of, hey, we would need immunity for our soldiers and our Marines who are on the grounds, and they knew there was no way that the Iraqi government would agree to that. And that essentially killed this idea. There was nothing to maneuver. I mean, Mitt Romney has, I wonder, A, he doesn't know anything about Iraq. Does he have anyone on his staff that knows anything about Iraq? Because these are questions, these are high school answers these guys are given.
Karen, go ahead quickly before we go.
Well, I was going to say, I think the problem is that Romney's listening to the same guys that got us into this mess who are totally not able to read the situation, which, look at the way the president was able to. I mean, John McCain criticized him leading from behind on Libya. Actually, that was a very effective strategy that the president employed, and we've got to change the way we think about how we engage with different parts of the world.
Jon Soltz and Karen Finney, thank you both for joining tonight.
Thank you.